Okay, we're recording. All right. So tonight, modernism and or the international style and Art Deco. Those are two I guess, stylistic movements that happen simultaneously. Art Deco is really was not as dominant as the international style and modernism. And when I say it's really modernism with a capital M, the so let me read a little bit from your Abrams Guide, which is the author summarizes this stuff very well, and I'll talk a little bit. I have notes I'll talk about while I'm doing the presentation also. So French Art Deco is so Art Deco. What is really known as Art Deco originated in France, and it is the name Art Deco was applied later in the 1960s when the style came back in the United States. But it's often referred to as the last of the great period styles. Art Deco began to develop in Paris in the first decade of the 20th century as a reaction to the excesses of Art Nouveau, which Art Nouveau itself was in part a rejection of neoclassicism and what you could call excesses of neoclassicism, with antecedents in Glasgow style, which is Macintosh, and the Wiener Werkstätte, which is also a sort of pre-modernist group in Vienna. The modern style, or Le Style Moderne, as it was originally called, found immediate inspiration in the avant-garde, cubism, and fauve colors. So the fauves were a group of French painters. And the dazzling sets and costumes designed by Leon Bakst for the Ballet Russe, or the Russian ballet, which was in Paris. It also drew from sources as diverse as ancient Egypt, Africa, and the Jazz Age. There was also a revival of certain neoclassical styles like Louis XVI and Empire. Okay, so as I said, the designation Art Deco was bestowed long after the fact. On the occasion of its revival in the United States in the late 1960s, it was named for the 1925 Paris exhibition that provided its most prominent showcase. In French, my French is not good, but I'm going to give it a shot here. L'Exposition Internationale des Arts Décoratifs et Industriels Modernes, or the International Exposition of Decorative Arts and Modern Industry. So Art Deco, it's a lot simpler. It sought to reassert France's fashion leadership in the face of German innovations in modern design. But the exhibition, that Paris exhibition of 1925, actually celebrated a style that, in its embrace of luxury and rich materials, was already behind the times. So 1925 was after World War I, and World War I was devastating, especially in Europe. It really was mostly contained to Europe. But the destruction and just the cost, the high cost of human life led a lot of the modernists of the International Style and the Bauhaus Institute in Germany. It led them to a more social imperative, you could say, where they felt that they needed to use the advancements in industry to make the world better and not worse. And, with chemical weapons and more powerful bombs and other, machine guns and things like that in World War I, a lot of the architects and designers, really all throughout Europe, they fought in that war and they experienced firsthand what all of that destructive power could do. And so the Germans were more of the mind that we need to change things and make this better. And they were very idealistic about it. Not all of them, but there was a very strong attitude to do that, which is very interesting that should be the attitude coming out of Germany right before Hitler came to power.
I was going to say it didn't work out well for them.
Part of the problem, does anyone know any history of World War I? Like how it ended? Well, Germany very nearly won, and when the United States came in in the last, really the last year of the war, they turned the war in favor of the French and English, and the end of World War I, Germany was basically made responsible to pay for everything, and they really the English, the Americans, and the French really just, they really sought to destroy Germany over the war. So that was where you had this crazy inflation. I remember seeing photographs, hearing stories about people in Germany, right after World War I, a wheelbarrow full of cash just to buy a loaf of bread, like that kind of inflation, where. And so there was this strong resentment in Germany after World War I that led very directly to Hitler. But laid over that was this great idealism, and it already had been there before World War I. So the French, on the other hand, with Art Deco, they go with luxury. So there's this contrast in temperament. So the Art Deco. So that's where that statement comes from, that that the French were already behind the times with its embrace of luxury and rich materials. So you'll see what Art Deco looks like. The Art Deco has, there's some specific features to it. I guess design features. There's sort of the luxury deco. You also get what might be called budget deco, which is more mass produced, slapped together. Art Deco was popular and was known with the silent films. The kinds of sets you saw in early Hollywood films were really this sort of exaggerated deco style, and so that was kind of considered to be when you make it, that's what your place is going to look like. It's going to look like this Art Deco Hollywood interior. Most people weren't going to, but it was more like this sort of fantasy of wealth that was promoted. Especially the films in in the 1930s during the Depression, they were extremely popular because it was this even if you were broke, it was nice to just see something nice on screen in a film. So the French Deco did pick up Louis XVI Empire style certain features of the furnishings for French Deco, lowered seats and chairs, so like set low, closer to the floor, much more loungy. And the cocktail table was introduced as basically just like kind of like a side table, coffee table, but very low. There was a certain similar to the earlier chinoiserie. There was a certain like what would have been considered exoticizing, like making things look Asian or sort of like vaguely from from Asia somewhere. The term orientalizing has been applied to this. Certain kinds of finishes, kind of like a shagreen or shark skin, which is kind of like a really fine mottled looking surface. Very smooth, glossy, lacquered surfaces. There are certain people. There's a designer in here, Eileen Gray, who was really good with lacquer. And that was kind of like where she started in design. She was rare. She's originally from Ireland. And she first went to Paris to learn lacquering, and she was very good at it. And she kind of separated herself, made friends with some other designers and architects, and ended up designing a lot of really interesting furniture. Some of it, Deco, some of it clearly modernist. Some of it looks like it could have been designed recently. She was tremendous. I'll show you some pictures of her work. But her, she employed lacquer, this like really glossy, like almost like impossibly glossy. Like, the wood still looks wet. Overall, it's kind of a conservative style. I guess even conservative. Like there's a high level of craft. They use this like new material like chrome, which the modernists and the international style uses like this like steel tube, really generously, like in furniture. Deco is like a little too conservative for that. So you'll see it is almost like it is like, as they say, the last great period style. It is a bit nostalgic for certain period like styles from the past. Art Deco also drew upon African influence, like African arts, which might be called generally referred to as ethnographic. There is some of the they would use like African sculpture or motifs from African art. There's the ziggurat, which is a kind of like the stepped pyramid, or there's a sort of like parallel like lightning strike design that's very much Deco.
Mr. O'Connor,
Yes.
are you like sharing a like a PowerPoint of some
Yeah.
sort or no?
No, I'm just talking right now. I will.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure that that's not the case because we don't see anything.
Yeah. Thank you. That's yes. I will confirm there's no presentation yet. I wanted to remember to go through notes before showing you pictures, because sometimes I will forget things from my notes if I don't. Beep, 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 beep. Aztec. So there was this interest in like this. You see this in some of the higher like skyscrapers, like the top of the Chrysler Building in New York City, where it kind of like you get this kind of like setback, kind of like a zigzag. I'll show you when you see that you'll see what I'm talking about. Radios. Have you ever seen like I've seen this with like radios? Like just like the housing on a radio will have this like Deco design. Some of them really great, like they're furniture. So radios are a new thing that need to be designed, and every seems like here every decade you've got new materials or new objects that are being invented or developed that sort of like work their way into design. Okay, so now I'm going to share with you. So since with all that, we'll talk about Deco, and so we'll share the screen. Okay, good, we're here. And where is you, Art Deco? All right. All right, so at last, pictures. So here's a poster for that exposition, the International Exposition of Decorative Arts and Modern Industry. So here's a picture from it. One of the most prominent features I see in this picture is what looks like a reeded column, which is Egyptian. That sort of like looks like a big bundle of reeds, and the furniture. So it's upholstered furniture. Those are bergères, or there's a bergère there in the foreground. Looks kind of like almost like it's cut, kind of like from. I don't know. It's almost like it's cut from a solid object. I mean, let's say it looks sculptural. That's a better way to say that. Okay. Cedric Gibbons was a set designer in Hollywood, and he had a lot to do with, giving the world, especially the people like the United States, this image of Art Deco as the sort of like the standard for luxury. So you can see on the left, like this, like above the chimney, this is that sort of like ziggurat with this like zigzag forms receding spatially. So it's this repetition. It's really like it's a pattern that you can see it around the fireplace on the right side, even like the stacking of these wall sconces. So this is 1928, and in a lot of these films, there were silent films in black and white, and so the sets were really important. They were really almost like they were like one of the stars of the film. So here is another later, this 1931 exposition of Arts of Africa and Oceania, which is South Pacific. And there's this really interesting appearance to these armchairs in leather, that they really do look sort of like those massive arms, with this like very sculptural, somehow organic appearance, and this like gigantic urn right there, which looks more like it's like simple Egyptian motif going around it. Here's an example of budget deco. So that's I like the You can see like those wall sconces, the lamp. It's
I like the side table.
yes. Well, you mean like the one in front with the bent wood?
Yes, the front and
Yes.
center
That's pretty,
one.
yes, that is pretty cool. But it's really like it's kind of a letdown from that. So here's a dressing table. So you can see that urn right there below the table surface, and you see this like this really glossy appearance to it. This is really like this is kind of like an updated Empire style, is what it seems like to me. I think that in general, I don't expect everyone to have all of the different slivers of neoclassicism down. But if you could look at that and see that urn and say neoclassical, you're in good shape. But look at what happens with the reflection, where the reflection almost becomes a new part of it's almost like it extends down into that wood. That's a beautiful object. Whether you like, that's almost like it has that neoclassicism, but it's very modern. Again, this is a cabinet by Emile Jacques Ruhlmann, and here, nope, I thought I did have this. This is like very much like something that was made for Marie Antoinette in the Louis XVI era. So this is like Louis XVI revival, or referral. I guess it's a reference to it to me. Here is a day bed. Look at the glossy finish on that wood. Beautiful. It's a beautiful object. I love it. It's really massive. Rosewood and gilt bronze. That's got to be an expensive piece of furniture. There's no way around it. But still, very beautiful. Here is this. These screens to divide interiors were very popular. This is a good example of this sort of like angular, sort of cubist. It's almost like it's like a graphic design variation on cubism. This really like. This is the kind of thing that's happening in like representation, figurative representation. You see with, you will remember, of course, that the Greeks around 2,500 years ago, they resolved accurate representation of the human figure. And so, we don't really have to do that anymore in art. We haven't really needed to for a very long time. And so you get this kind of thing where it's stylized, it's very angular, even kind of stiff. And it's really sort of like, celebrating this very like almost rigid and stylized way of representing the figure. So this, on the left here, this sofa by Marcel Cord. It looks like there's a Henri Rousseau painting. He made a lot of these paintings, this sort of like almost naive paintings with African scenes. Africa was exotic. Africa was in the process of being colonized by the Europeans it was in the 19th century, post-slavery. rather than enslave the Africans, they decided to just go and take over and exploit resources as much as they could. And the French were, a part of all that, and so they absorbed a certain of, I guess, either influence or, even, sometimes a superficial adoption of African themes. There. Yeah, this, I love this thing, this sofa. So Marcel Cord is a French furniture designer of the Deco era, or I guess sort of like of that Deco style. And it looks like that, like the wooden, it's almost like it's like a woven surface is what it looks like. It looks like a big nut cut open. Here, this is, this photograph could appear next to any definition of ethnographic design. It's, I think you could also say it's co-opting, meaning just sort of like, taking African design, using it as your own, or in this case, using it as French design. It's, I think you always have to be careful just like scooping up designs from other cultures and just putting them straight into your own work without really trying to, absorb them and interpret them. I think this chair would be a lot more interesting if the legs were not meant to look like traditional African sculptures. There she is, Eileen Gray. She is a very interesting, to me, a very interesting designer. She designed some stuff like this that's, those legs are interesting, not necessarily graceful. Very obvious, like the lacquer surface on those two discs are very, very glossy surface. You can see from the reflection. Here, we saw this a long time ago, talking about Egypt, this lotus table with tassels. And the tassels are kind of over the top, but, this is her, using the lotus as this decorative element and structural element at the same time. Lacquered screen. Dragon's armchair. I love this. Is just kind of like, she had no problem making something that was interesting but weird. Lamp, which honestly I've seen, stuff that came out like sculpture being made in the 1980s. They must have been looking at Eileen Gray, because that. It's like sometimes we see things, in this class. To me, like I see things and I just wonder how does that come from the 1920s? It is so strange, and I like it. I don't want it in my home, but I'm glad Eileen Gray made it. Here is an apartment. So she did interior design. I don't know that it was really called interior design. She, it wasn't until about the mid 20th century that you get people, coming along who are called interior designers. There's, really the term decoration would have been applied, like interior decorator or, decorations would have been applied to it. Here, this pirogue sofa. pirogue is a boat. And that's just, I don't know, it's beautiful. Not very practical, but you're designing something. You're designing something that's supposed to be interesting. It's not going to be practical. Here is a sofa with those oversized cushions on, just so I'm sure that without those cushions, those arms, the corner on the arm of that chair would be nice and hard. But beautiful, I love the red. And here, this entrance with this black lacquer screens, I really like this. Very elaborate screen that, you push it together and you see through it, you pull it flat, and you can't. It's a really nice abstract pattern. And, looks like it's a modular design where you could keep stacking. You could just keep stacking them on top, or even add more panels to make it longer or wider. Unfortunately, animal skins were all the rage. African animal skins, terrible. But this Bibendum chair is really cool. You still see this one around. People still use this chair. There are modern, there's modern versions. I guess it's really like where it's modern maybe is is like in the upholstery. But I've seen this chair out in the world, and manufactured new. The Transat chair, not so graceful, but she's trying to make this sort of like modern recliner with that separate headrest. So there's like this, really, like, to me, this is an attempt at ergonomics, or just making it flexible so that it can adjust to the body of the person sitting in it. And here is this apartment with some of her furnishings in it. Here is a colorized version, which is kind of interesting. But you can see there's the Transat chair, table with adjustable top. And this couch, I love this couch. Isn't this cool? 1928? Almost 100 years ago, somebody designed this. To me, this looks more recent. Does anyone else get that from it?
Yes, I agree.
I
It's
like
very
it a
modern.
lot.
Yeah.
I would have this in my house today.
Yeah, me too. Although it would be like this glorious scratching depot for my cats. There's someone
I have
that's. Go ahead.
What's that silver thing in the back? Is that like to put your back on?
Yeah, I don't know what that's for. It's a bar for if it's a backrest, it's got to be the least comfortable backrest I can think of,
Yeah.
unless it had nails sticking out of it. Possibly.
It almost looks like a handrail, but
Yeah.
I don't know how that would really make sense.
I think it's a design feature that's meant to reflect the frame that you see in front. She was one of the few people. I mean, this is where, like, this couch is not. I wouldn't call this couch Art Deco. I would call it modernist, and like this is more in line with the international style, which we'll see with some of the next presentations. So Deco in America or the USA. Chicago Tribune Tower competition. Do you see the way what's referred to as a setback tower, where the towers get smaller as it goes up? That allows, with that stone cladding, it allowed them to make buildings taller because they got lighter as they got taller. It's also an interesting feature, but it has that ziggurat, like that, almost like right angles, vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal. We almost got that in Chicago. I think it would have been great. The Chicago Tribune held a competition for a design. It was really more like for the exterior appearance of the building, and the one that was chosen, which is really kind of unfortunate because it's stylistically it's a mess. But we almost got this Eliel Saarinen building. But it's a good example of sort of like modern, Deco applied to a skyscraper. Elevator doors. Do you see that ziggurat above the doors? The zigzag. Skyscraper bookcase. So skyscrapers. So Art Deco is all about what's modern, and skyscrapers, tall buildings. They're really super tall buildings. Chicago got it kicked off in the 19th century, but New York took it and ran with it with buildings like the Chrysler Building and the Empire State Building. And so, that's a beautiful tower right there. So 1928 to 1930 is when that was built. This idea of, bigger is better, and we build them tall because we can. And that design, the Deco design, is really beautiful at the top of the building, where it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as it rises. And that's just the very top of the building. Fiesta ware in, I guess, sort of like commercial ceramics. You can see that, that repetition of of the circular ridge. Beautiful color. I really like Fiesta ware. Is that it? Oh no. Should have more for Deco. Well, anyway, that's fine. We had a lot of nice Eileen Gray. So Art Deco. Now, compare that to this. So with the Bauhaus, or I guess with modernism and international style, I'm starting with the Bauhaus. And the Bauhaus Institute in Germany was part of a state art school, and it was the director of what came to be known as the Bauhaus was a guy named Walter Gropius. Where do I have a? No, oh no, I was gonna. Oh, here I got a picture of Gropius in there somewhere. I mentioned this, the effect of World War I. So he was a young practicing architect before World War I, and he was really somebody pushing modern materials, glass and steel, and also these windows around these stairways, I mean, people were not, people like a wall made of glass was too weird for most people when they started doing this. People felt exposed. They felt like things wouldn't stay up. It's going to break. Just don't, like it was just too weird. But Gropius was really into, he wanted to use the industrial, like the possibilities that industry offered to create new buildings. Walter Gropius was an architecture student in the first decade of the 20th century. And I read a biography of him years ago. And he mentions, like in some of his writings, that when he was a student in architecture school, they were told that everything good has already, really, like neoclassicism is it. And there really isn't anything left to design. So just learn to copy, the classics. And he and other, young architects and artists like him just completely rejected that idea. And why wouldn't they? Like, what point is there if you're just going to go and just like, you're never going to come up with anything original? So that kind of, that attitude that he got from his, from the older generation really pushed him harder to come up with something new. So, similar to the way, like, back to Louis XIV and the technology, like they're so like pushing the sort of pushing innovation in, in manufacturing, like mirrors and glass. Gropius is another one who is straight trying to see, like, what can industry do? He was an army officer in the German army in World War I and nearly died multiple times. According to this biography, he was once buried under rubble for about 3 days in an artillery attack. And when he got out, he was recovering in the hospital. He'd already been hired to take over this, this technical school, which became the Bauhaus. And he decided as he was recovering, he decided, I'm going to use it to make something new, like really like try to make a better world. So here's a drawing. Another guy, Mies van der Rohe, who came to Chicago right before World War II started. He made, before it was even possible to build, or even before people were building buildings like this, he was making drawings of them. Mies van der Rohe had a vision for the future, and he, one of those rare people who was able to make it a reality. Lionel Feininger woodcut, the Bauhaus Manifesto. You see how this this woodcut creates this like fragmented, faceted. It's a cubist influenced picture. Very modern, and really more at the time more of an avant-garde kind of a picture. Now the image is of a cathedral. The international style modernists, and especially the people at the Bauhaus Institute, they looked similar to the way William Morris did. They looked back to the Gothic era, like Gothic architecture, as this model for, this sort of collaboration of a group of creative people putting something, building something greater than themselves. And so the Bauhaus Institute was considered to be similar, like a similar idea that there were, all these creative people Gropius as the director hired a lot of the more innovative educators and artists and people from working in industrial arts to come to this school and teach students how to make art and design along modern principles. They were, one of their innovations was that when the students came into the school, they took what was called the basic course, which was the first year where they just took a variety of subjects: drawing, painting, sculpture, weaving, history, a whole bunch of different subjects. And at the end of the year, the faculty would review their work and make the recommendation: you should go into the painting workshop. You, over here, you are really good with three-dimensional stuff. You're going into sculpture. They did not let students decide at the beginning when they came in, before they'd done anything, which discipline they were going to pursue. They wanted to sort of do this as a collaborative process. So this is a picture of the second Bauhaus campus. The first one was in an older existing building, and when they moved, it was open. They began in 1919, right after World War I, and moved to the city of Dessau for 1926, after they wore out their welcome in the city of Weimar, which was culturally very conservative. So, Bauhaus Institute. This is the band Bauhaus from the 1980s. They're really cool, but it's this Bauhaus much earlier in the 1920s. This is a photograph of the performing arts workshop, where they would put on stage productions that were meant to express design principles. They were the weirdos. I mean, they were like the very beginning of the modern art student. And that city of Weimar that despised the Institute so much, at least the one thing they liked about the Bauhaus is that they threw great parties. So here, Gropius, 1883 and 1969. He was the first director of the Bauhaus Institute. He, as many of the creative people and intellectuals did, he left Germany before World War II. After Hitler came to power, he and a lot of them left. He ended up coming to the United States and teaching for a long time at Harvard. Here is a factory that he designed. And, this idea of if you think back to some of the, the iron tech and this sort of industrial look that at first was just, kept for industrial kinds of places. The idea of the factory building to Gropius was something beautiful. And he felt that factories should be beautiful, and that, more other kinds of places should employ some of that industrial beauty. So that's a great, curtain wall of glass right there on this Bauhaus building. And of course, the structure is just on the inside of the building, so the glass wall is not holding anything up. Marcel Breuer was another, he was one of the studio masters, as they called them. They had different studios in different art and design disciplines, and Breuer was one of the I believe he was the one of the studio masters for the furniture studio. But he was one of the people to pioneer the use of bent steel tube to create a frame for furniture. So there, Alvar Aalto, he is a Finnish designer whose work we'll see when we talk about Scandinavian modern, but apparently he liked the chair. And this, the Marcel Breuer Seska chair. This chair, look, that's the one on the left. I kind of like it better without the arms. There's a version without the arms, but it has this like wicker, varnished wood, bent tubular steel. And if you look at without the arms, if you look at that steel frame, it's all one continuous, loop. I mean, it's not all one piece, but if you follow it spatially, it's continuous. And I make the comparison with the Tonnet chair to the right with the bent wood, which was also like, the Tonnet chair was very modern compared to a lot of stuff, because it's from the middle of the 19th century. And, it takes until, the mid to late 1920s that we get more furniture like it. Table, glass and steel. So glass and steel and concrete were three primary materials here. This is a desk lamp, Wilhelm Wagenfeld. One of the things that the Bauhaus Institute was supposed to be doing, where they were supposed to be teaching, having the students create prototypes for that could be manufactured and sold. And it was the hope was that they would use this to make money for the school. And something like this desk lamp is this is something that could be possible because it's fairly simple and straightforward. Unfortunately, a lot of what the students designed was experimental, and to mass produce something like this would have been more expensive, and the idea was that they would make economical industrial products, but unfortunately, too much of the stuff that the students made, because they're art students, they're trying to figure out things and make interesting things. A lot of their stuff couldn't be made cheaply, or at least they couldn't be sold cheaply. Annie Albers, she was the studio master for the weaving workshop, and the weaving workshop was, of course, where most of the women were, because it was still very traditional in shuttling women over to what was considered to be traditionally a woman's activity. And but Annie Albers did some really beautiful stuff, like very modern designs, geometric abstraction. I really like her work. And some of her work, like for her the woven tapestry. She also some of she and other people designed wallpaper, like wall coverings, with a similar abstract design. And that was the stuff that was very popular, and that was some of the stuff that they could actually manufacture and sell on behalf of the school. So here, in 1926, after they moved to their new campus in the city of Dessau, and the buildings were designed by Walter Gropius. So this dining hall with these very simple stools, very simple chairs. Lecture hall, similar, very simple folding chairs. all in there, bolted to the floor, and like that lighting, so you can see this very modern lighting, modern seating, and modular and mass-produced industrial seating. This is his office with a tapestry from the weaving workshop. This carpet from the weaving workshop that was it's a design from the painter Paul Klee, who was a Swiss modern Swiss painter who taught there. Student dorms. So we start to see architecture. Gropius was one of the people who started to design buildings that look the way buildings still look like this. He designed these houses for the studio masters to live in. And again, this is modern architecture still looks like this. So the man had a vision. Here is a tea set and tablecloth. This is some of the I guess industrial arts produced at the Bauhaus. And here, this is the workshop wing of the Bauhaus, one of the Bauhaus buildings. You can see very clearly the structure inside, just inside the glass. And I really love that corner. That is just this really thin, just very thin corner of just like that very light framing on the glazing. Here is some French Bauhaus-inspired interior. A little similar to, looks like the guys like a little similar to some of the Eileen Gray furniture. Well, I love this like big poofy like foam cylinder around the that steel arm. But Bauhaus, the modernist interior, I don't like especially the German modernists would not jam so much stuff into one room. That's really like too cluttered. This is from so you do start to get mass-produced modern and like mass-produced modernism or international style. So that tubular steel, it takes it took some doing to get people to accept steel, this like this metal framed furniture where you don't hide the metal frame. It didn't seem like it was like like something for the home. Maybe for the office or like a train station or like a diner or something like that. But one thing that did make a difference in getting people to accept this is the Depression and World War II. Especially in after World War II, with so much destruction and so much destruction of property and possessions, the modern stuff. This is a little earlier than that, but like furnishings such as this were a lot easier to accept when you had nothing. And this is what is available. A little vague Deco fireplace surround too. This Kevin Weber, love this chair. That's graceful. All right. That is Deco and the first part of modernism, the Bauhaus modernism. So I'm going to stop the recording, and I'm going to take 10 minutes, and I'll be back with the rest. We'll talk about Mies van der Rohe next.